Welcome to the Liberty Minute with Jared Hudson. Jared is a former U.S. Navy SEAL sniper and is the founder and current CEO of Covenant Rescue Group. Join in as Jared brings real-world experience and offers a fresh take on the topics that matter most.
Hey guys, Jared here, bringing you your Liberty Minute. Today we're going to be talking about the Fifth Amendment, and we're not going to talk about the Fifth Amendment too long. Most people believe that the Fifth Amendment is strictly, hey, I don't have to incriminate myself, and that is an aspect of it, right? Hey, I want to plead the Fifth, but we're going to talk specifically about it and some of the little nuances to it. More in a layman's terms, you know, there'd be other people, scholars, and probably even attorneys that could give you a little more in depth on this, but we're just going to see how this impacts us and what this kind of affects us with in day-to-day life. So the Fifth Amendment, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment of unless on a presentment of indictment. For some reason, that was a tongue tie for me. Indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. So that's the first thing that kind of holds that. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or infamous crime unless they have the presentment of indictment or a grand jury, unless, of course, we're in a time of war, right, which changes how that is applied. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, right? So you can't be charged with the same offense two times. Nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived. That's where a lot of people will plead the Fifth is, hey, I can't be compelled to testify against myself for what I did. Nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So every time you're arrested, you're deprived of your life, liberty, and your property. There has to be the due process of law, right? And there's a timeline on that. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. This goes back, we talked about the Third Amendment being, I kind of gave the example. I said, hey, it'd be kind of like, you know, cops showing up. Hey, here's my badge. I'm taking your car to do this. That happens in the movies. It doesn't happen in real life because really we can't do that. It says that your property can't be taken without just compensation, even if they reimburse you for your vehicle, which they probably won't. It's a problem. Now, that's something that we often see. We do see a lot of private property taken in the fulfillment of the law with some of the seizure laws we have, especially as it relates to drugs and all that. I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with all of those, and I don't necessarily disagree with all of them. But if your private property is taken for public use, there has to be just compensation if it was taken not inside, not because a criminal act was committed. So let's get into a brief outline of what this means. So a grand jury requirement. Now, this is for serious federal crimes, right? Because remember it said a capital or otherwise infamous crime, okay? You got to have a grand jury indictment. So that'd be like murder, attempted murder, something along those lines, maybe human trafficking. You're going to have a grand jury indictment. I've been subpoenaed to sit in grand jury before with individuals we've arrested for these serious or infamous crimes. Got to go to grand jury. And it's generally going to go to grand jury. The exceptions exist for cases involving military militia during wartime or a public danger. So, again, we haven't really seen that. I don't think, there's probably not anybody. Maybe if there's anybody that was alive during World War II, they might have saw that when we were in war with the Allies and the Axis. You know, we were fighting Japan and Germany, and we were a bunch of different Axis powers. But when we were fighting those, a lot of times I think they were putting people in different containment camps, even if they hadn't done anything wrong. And I think that would fall under, that would be the only thing that I could think of where, hey, the Fifth Amendment goes away when we're in a time of war like that. I don't even know if that would fall under that, but maybe somebody more educated than me can put something in the comments on that. But double jeopardy clause. Now, this is something I am familiar with. We actually just finished training for a young lady who, long story short, kind of situation, her assailant was let out after a year in prison, basically on a double jeopardy clause because a judge had a clerical error that essentially made it where they couldn't continue to hold him because they said that he was tried twice for the same crime, and he was convicted one time, but they ultimately threw it out because because of a double jeopardy clause. No person can be tried twice for the same crime after being acquitted or convicted. And this protects individuals from being subjected to multiple prosecutions for the same offense. Now, this is pretty good, and this works, and this works for most of what we see, because that's unjust. I shouldn't be, once I pay my dues or pay the punishment, pay the fine, whatever it is, I don't need to be hit up and rolled up again for the same thing that I already paid for, right? There is some grace and mercy that exists within how our laws and our Constitution is written, and that's what this is about. This protects individuals from being subject to multiple prosecution for the same offense. So that's the biggest thing. Self-incrimination clause. Now, this is what most people know about. Hey, I plead the fifth, right? Somebody raise their hand and says, I plead the fifth. I don't want to say anything. Individuals cannot be compelled to testify against themselves in criminal cases. And it doesn't necessarily, everybody thinks when somebody pleads the fifth, oh yeah, they definitely did something wrong. No, not necessarily, right? I can't be compelled to say something that you might use to incriminate me in this case. Again, going back to the January 6th situation, because that's something that's kind of at the forefront of everybody's mind. Trump's going to go in office saying, I'm going to pardon all these folks. Well, many of these individuals, they incriminated themselves, right? Even if they didn't do anything wrong, they waived their rights, from what I understand. A lot of them that have been put in jail waived their rights, and then they said, well, yeah, this happened, or I walked into the Capitol. Now, as stupid as that is, and as much as it wasn't a riot or what are they calling it? An insurrection, because there was no weapons used, so it's not an insurrection. The only people killed was an unarmed white woman killed by a cop, a black cop, I think. Right? Imagine if the same thing happened to if a white cop shot an unarmed black woman. It'd be a different thing. But without going too much into that, that being said, a lot of these individuals incriminated themselves. Don't do that. You don't have to incriminate yourself. This is something that's given to you by God. You do not have to incriminate yourself for anything that you have done. You have a Fifth Amendment that outlines that protection. I mean, even Jesus himself didn't incriminate himself. What did they hang him for? They said, well, he was really if you look at it physically, as spiritually, he was the lamb slain before the foundation of the world. He was the Son of God who came to save us for our sins. So that's why he was slain and put on a cross. However, when he stood before Pilate, he stood there silent like a lamb going to the slaughter. He didn't say a word. And even when Pilate said, they're saying that you're a king of God, are you the Son of God? He says, you say it so. Jesus didn't even incriminate himself. He didn't say, I'm the Son of God who comes to take away the sins of the world. In the moment as he stood before his accusers, whether it was the Sanhedrin when he was standing before their judgment in the temple, or before Pilate and the Romans before their judgment in their courts, he didn't even incriminate himself. You don't have to incriminate yourself. This is the basis for the right to remain silent. Again, I plead the fifth. That's where that phrase comes from. So you don't have to incriminate yourself. Due process clause. The government can't deprive an individual of life, liberty, or property without fair legal procedures. Now, this is something that happens a lot of times out in the world, on the road, in somebody's house with law enforcement. And it ensures a fair trial and safeguards against arbitrary actions by the state. But this happens with law enforcement. We have to be careful on the apprehension side of law enforcement that we don't remove someone's right to due process. They have the right to an attorney. They have the right to to bond out of jail. They have the right to do certain things. And as a law enforcement officer who makes the initial apprehension based on probable cause that a crime is committed, it's very important that the law enforcement officer upholds the due process. And that's why you'll see there's oftentimes a timeline within, 24, 48, 72 hours, whatever it is, that somebody will have to go to court and this will have to be presented. You get a preliminary hearing and you go through that whole process. So that is what due process is, and it takes time. One of the hardest things that we see is because due process is an important outline role for the government to participate in our Constitution. It kind of backs things up because we're always dealing with that. But you have these things, all right, so they get their due process, they go through the thing, they bond out, whatever it is, and now you've got 18 months before you actually, have a trial and see, see does this person actually do this or this person not actually do this. Now, there's certain things that are put in place that can make stuff happen quicker, but it takes forever. And the reason it takes forever is because our court system is so backed up. My personal opinion is because we have gone above and beyond. We've gone overboard, I guess, with the drug issues, right? Since the 80s, the war on drugs. You can't wage a war on an inanimate object. It's just like the global war on terror. What is that, a war on scariness? War is between individuals or groups or nations or whatever it is, right? A war is good guys, the bad guys, the Germans, the U.S., the Russians, the U.S., the law enforcement guy and the bank robber, cops and robbers, all that. So that is, you got the U.S. Army cavalry and the Indians back in the 1800s. That's the North and the South. That is what a war is. So that's the one problem. We believe in something called the war on drugs. It hasn't worked, and all it does is it just continues to fill up our court systems, and that's one of the reasons we don't see an end to it. So due process actually takes place on the front end after the apprehension. Your preliminary hearings, you go through all of that, and they say, yep, we met the constitutional requirements for due process, but then they're going to decide something 18 months, 2 years later even. Attorneys get involved. You go through all this back and forth. And really, I think my personal opinion is because we try to criminalize too much, and it totally removes this away. We deprive people of their life, their liberty, and their property because now they are not jailed in a jail cell, but they're chained to the court system. They're chained to the issues that exist within the court system and then the cost of the court system. It's taking my property. You look at, I used General Flynn as an example on the last one. One of his biggest things, he's taking out second mortgages on his house. He's going through the process just to go through the court process to prove his innocence. They make it to where you can't win. So I would argue the vast majority of what our court systems do actually is the antithesis or is against what we see happen or what we see the Fifth Amendment outlining in due process. That's one of my biggest issues with it because you don't have your life because now I've got this 18-month, 2-year period that I'm going through this process trying to prove myself innocent. I've got property being taken from because it costs me money to be able to defend myself and to be able to go for and live. And so, which removes my liberty because now I'm chained to it. Yeah, I'm not in a jail cell, but I'm chained to the court system. So I would argue that our court systems remove due process. But at least at the letter of the law, at the apprehension side, which I've been involved in, they uphold it because they get those things done fast. You can bond out and you can move on in that. In that direction. Private property can't be taken for public use without just compensation. This is kind of an eminent domain sort of thing. It'd be like, power lines, ditches, roads, things like that. Hey, we got eminent domain. We can, take 10 foot up to increase the road or put a new ditch in to keep water off the road or whatever it is. When they seize land for public projects. I don't necessarily agree with this. You want growth, but also it's your individual property. I'm not big on the eminent domain piece. I think more of this was happening back in probably the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, when you really saw infrastructure having to be grown. I know even before then, probably in the back in Teddy Roosevelt's days when they were working on roads and building the interstate system. I just learned not too long ago the interstate system was built so in case the U.S. was ever attacked, so they could land aircraft or move soldiers in massive movements to wherever they needed to go. I thought that was pretty neat. I don't know how true it is, but I was told that not too long ago as we were talking about how the interstates were created. But eminent domain is something that I don't know if it's happening very much anymore. I don't have enough property for the government won't take any of it. But with that being said, maybe some of y'all have seen experiences. But the biggest thing with the Fifth Amendment is you don't have to incriminate yourself. Remember that. Talk to your attorney. Don't want to talk to the cops. I'm going to talk with my attorney. You do not have to incriminate yourself. You can't be charged for the same thing twice. I know of a few cases where that's happened that I've seen and been a part of and seen them get thrown out just because of that. They said, hey, there's this double jeopardy clause kicks in, and then due process. You know, your due process is probably going to happen on the apprehension end with local law enforcement or federal law enforcement. I think that your cops that arrest people do a pretty good job of that. But I do think that even though it's not viewed this way by probably attorneys and people within our system or in our court systems, they don't view it this way. But I do believe that the way the court system currently works actually removes due process for most American citizens because your life, your liberty, and your property are basically locked down and put on hold, removed from you while you try to get through this process that oftentimes takes a couple of years. So that's your Fifth Amendment without any frills. I don't see anything else that really stands out to me on the Fifth Amendment. So thank you for listening. That's your Liberty Minute.